When we think of climate change, the first things that usually come to mind are a scorched earth, melting polar ice caps, and a depleted ozone layer. But we must also recognize its impact on women, the poor, and other vulnerable groups. In the next few minutes, this video will help you understand why it is necessary to address gender-specific vulnerabilities and social exclusion in achieving climate goals. It will help you make more informed decisions while planning climate action in the light of the growing climate threat. When it comes to climate change, men and women experience the impacts differently because of societal, cultural, and economic reasons, which create gender-differentiated roles and responsibilities at the household and community levels. Men and women also differ in responses and capacity to adapt to climate change, depending on the individual's access to resources, assets, information, services, and decision-making power. Women play a major role in agriculture, accounting for 43% of the agricultural labor force in developing countries, a figure that rises to more than 60% in parts of South Asia and in Africa. Agriculture is a vulnerable sector due to climate change. Thus, any loss of agricultural production due to climate change increases women's drudgery to feed the family. In urban areas, women in the poorest households live in areas that are vulnerable to urban flooding, which is becoming more frequent due to the compounded effects of high-intensity rains and poor urban planning. Higher incidence of poverty and lack of education further adds to the vulnerability of women. Women are often poorer, less educated, and less involved in political, community, and household decision-making processes that affect their lives. Poverty and exclusion from decision-making put women and children at a disadvantage when coping with the adverse impacts of the changing climate. Thus, one can only imagine how the capacity to respond to natural hazards such as drought, floods, landslides, and cyclones is low. Studies show that women and children are 14 times more likely than men to die during natural disasters. 70% of fatalities from the 2004 Asian tsunami in Aceh, Indonesia, were women and children. Gender inequality intersects with other forms of vulnerabilities, which limit women's access to resources and decision-making, thereby inhibiting their ability to withstand the impacts of climate change, as well as recover from climate-related disasters. Therefore, countries need to address gender-specific climate change impacts in the areas of food security, agriculture and fisheries, biodiversity, water, health, human rights, and peace and security. The goal of addressing gender-specific impacts should be the reduction of vulnerability of women and marginalized communities to climate change. To address the differential vulnerability, countries need to give high priority to gender integration in their climate change policy and planning. Doing so can help governments contribute to cross-cutting national priorities related to gender and climate. Additionally, this would help drive progress on internationally agreed upon goals, such as the Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs, national development policies, sector plans, and climate financing frameworks must reflect women's priorities and needs. Only 64 of 190 countries which submitted their nationally determined contributions, or NDCs, to the UNFCCC included a reference to women or gender. Women and marginalized communities should be part of all decision-making regarding allocation of resources for climate change initiatives. Enhancing the integration of gender and poverty issues within climate finance planning and implementation can be approached across 4 pillars. A. Governance and institutions. B. Resource planning and allocation. C. Accountability. And D. Capacity building. Gender analysis of budget for climate change is needed to ensure investments in programs for adaptation, mitigation, technology transfer, and capacity building are gender sensitive. Technological developments should take into account women's specific priorities, needs, and roles, and make full use of their knowledge and expertise, including indigenous knowledge and traditional practices. It has been done in some countries. Bangladesh has formulated Climate Change Gender Action Plan, while the Budget Circular in Cambodia instructs ministries to contribute to gender integration in climate change policies and provide social protection for women during disasters. Nepal has incorporated gender in its climate budget tagging for agriculture, forest, and environment. Water resources, energy, and infrastructure sectors are also planning to introduce gender in climate budget tagging. The National Strategy of Thailand, for instance, recognizes the need for gender-sensitive adaptation policies, programs, and financing, including women's participation in the decision-making processes, to make climate change adaptation gender-sensitive. Thailand is also undertaking climate change cost-benefit analysis with a focus on gender and poverty at the sub-national level. However, merely including the issues in the laws and acts or any other regulatory frame alone is not sufficient. Tools like Climate Change Budget Integration Index or CCBII helps to assess such gaps in the planning and budget cycles of climate change policies across various dimensions: policy, systems, and accountability of integration. It also examines whether gender and social inclusion aspects have been taken into account. More evidence is needed for informing the development plans to embed gender and social inclusion in climate investments. For this, governments may consider conducting research in collaboration with civil society organizations on specific sectors for influencing the planning and budgeting processes. If we are indeed to create a better world in response to the challenges of climate change, then we must ensure that it is indeed a better world for all.